What is it that you see as being some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen districts make in this bond planning and implementing process?
If you can tie your needs and your wants to student achievement, you can continue showing the community that at the end of the day, this is going to help kids. I feel like that is most important. I feel that that's a very important part of the story.
Hello and welcome to The Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. This week, sitting in as the co-host is one of Clear's vice presidents and retired school superintendent, James Hopper. James, welcome back to the show and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, James. I'm very pleased to be here and I'm really excited about the program today.
I am too. We had AGCM on a couple weeks ago in episode 52 to talk about everything an owner's rep does, and it mostly centered around cities. And as we were looking forward on the calendar, we realized that at least in Texas, there's a lot of local elections coming up. One of the things that hit a lot of those local elections every year is school bonds. And I guess you've been a part of some school bond process yourself.
I have. When you're preparing to be a school superintendent, you focus so much on student achievement, and then you step in the seat and you realize, well, there's also this facilities aspect of it, and it's huge. It's huge. There is some information that's given you on that, of course, in a formal manner, but nothing prepares you for this like the on-the-job training that you get when you go through a bond.
Yeah, some school districts try to take this on themselves, and it seems like a big ask to take this project from A to Z with your existing personnel.
It's a huge ask. In fact, I've even been very transparent with one of my boards in our last situation, and I said, if I do not bring somebody on as a project manager, please understand that as superintendent, I will spend 75% of my time trying to do that job myself, and I don't think you want that. The people who do this work are invaluable.
This week, we have Derek Bird and Jason Burdine on to talk more about the bond process for schools and what an owner's rep can do for them. Derek Bird is the Director of Operations for Central Texas for AGCM, and Jason Burdine is a Texas-based education leader. Derek and Jason, welcome to The Clear Voice.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate this. A very timely issue. And so I wanted to start off, why is it that you feel like bond planning is such a critical issue right now for K-12 school districts?
You know, with a lot of the recent legislation and just everything that's being looked at with the bonds, being sure that you're following all the guidelines is super important. So having your 10-year plan in place, having all your educational specs, everything that the Attorney General is looking at to verify that you are following the rules set in place as you go out to build these facilities is super important. So when you start talking about a bond, you can't be starting 6 months in advance. You've got to be a year, 2 years in advance of when you need that bond in order to be doing all the preliminary work that's required for it.
Do you see, as you guys go out and do the things that you do you sometimes see school districts that are actually jumping into this without that long-range planning?
You do. Some of the backwards work that has to happen in order to get a bond plan in place and a 10-year plan in place, doing that concurrently is a lot of additional work. And so if you can plan ahead and do it in a timely manner, then that's very beneficial. But you know, some of these fast growth districts don't have that opportunity. The subdivisions start coming, the kids start coming, and you've got to kind of move on the fly. And so we see a little bit of both of that throughout the state.
And this is really where the importance of board stability comes in, because the more stable of a board that you have, the more opportunity you're going to have to do some long range planning, which ends up benefiting the community as a whole. I've gotten the question in the past, well, when's the right time to hire someone for help when it comes to construction? And the answer is as soon as possible, right? The more of a runway you give yourself, the more likely you're going to be successful.
So when you say bring somebody in for the construction, sometimes you'll talk to architects, sometimes you'll talk to people such as yourself, and then, of course, the contractors. Who should come in first, and what should that process look like?
All our trade partners are wonderful. And when we get out there, you know, obviously the architects are going to be very involved in the planning and the design, but really you want to have owner's representative, or, if you're a larger district, in-house representation, so that you have someone who is actually looking at the needs and the scopes for the district. When you're looking at the long range plan, you want someone who's looking at the constructability, the feasibility, how the flows are around the campuses. And so having someone kind of on staff or as a consultant early on in the process is important. Plus, when you start hiring architects, hiring contractors, going through contracts, looking at how you execute a contract. School district purchasing departments are great when they're buying widgets and things and buses, but construction and procurement is a whole different field. Having that expertise on board early on is really important to make sure that you're following all the guidelines set out.
Yeah, you just covered a whole lot of area there, which is great. As a sitting superintendent then, and again, my background is in academics and preparing students and all this, so this new field comes upon me, especially if I'm a fairly new superintendent. I need to have had a good long-term planning strategy, and let's say 2 years down the road, we're planning on going out for a bond. At what point would you recommend then putting a timeline on that? Do I bring in the project manager?
I'd like to answer that one. Speaking from experience, I feel like if you know that in 2 years you're going to be going out, I think that's the right time. I feel like that's when you can clearly get the plan together to introduce us to the community, right? Because community trust is everything. So the sooner you can start communicating that you're working on a project and you're putting thought behind it, in my opinion, is of great help to the school district. And once again, that community partnership and that community trust can begin sooner than later.
So, Jason, you touched on a really, really important piece there. And I do want to circle back and talk about the board that you brought up just a bit ago. But first, let's go ahead and dovetail on how does thoughtful planning influence public trust?
It helps with the public trust because the community can see that there's some transparency there, right? Like that you're actually working on what you say you're working on. Something that was really important to me as a school board member is, and obviously a community member and a parent, if you're asking the community to pass a bond, not only do you need to be transparent with them throughout the process to show them what you're working on and how you're working on it, but as soon as that bond passes, you need to start and begin work immediately, right? Because here I am approving hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's a year or two before you see something happening in a school. Well, you need to at that time be lining up for the next bond so you can continue that community trust.
Yes, sir.
Can I jump in on that?
Please.
There should be, at least, in my opinion, you need about a year runway when you're looking at a bond, because you want to get engaged with the community. You want to create a community action committee or a community advisory committee where they are involved and understand what the needs and challenges are within the facilities. Taking time to go and do site visits with a community group and show them what the students are actually living through day by day and showing them the need. While the district will typically have their scope and their program in mind, when you start to listen to that community, it helps shape what you're doing. I was actually in a district where the community determined they wanted a new cafeteria for their high school. It wasn't part of our original scope. It wasn't any of the intention. But as we looked through everything, realized we can do this. And then on the flip side of that, utilize the existing cafeteria to upgrade their CTE and culinary program. It really became a win all the way around by having that community involvement. But it's really important because when you call a bond in February, if your community hasn't been talking about it for 6-8 months before that, you're going to have trouble in May.
And James, I've heard you talk previously as a superintendent about not getting too invested in the project that is in your mind, and is bringing in the community like that to talk about what they think should be happening in the school district. Does that help a superintendent better formulate a plan that works for everybody?
Absolutely. I think that what happens sometimes, and with the experience that we have here at this table, I think you can understand. I think that sometimes as superintendents, we get married to our projects or to even our bond proposals, and we think that this thing has to go, and it has to go just like this. I know of a person who had a situation where he was told, you'll never get a bond passed in this town that has athletics attached to it. Duly noted. Once they did exactly what you said, Derek, the community was brought in for a period of 2 months to come in and tour the facilities and look around and see what they thought. That community decided they wanted to build a field house. They ended up building a field house, a football field, a baseball stadium, and a softball stadium, and put turf on all three of those, and it passed by 73%. So sometimes we have a situation where we have a project that we want to do, but we haven't gone out to the community to see what they want to do. In doing that, how do you guys help with that, with relaying that to the community or seeking input? How do you help a school district?
In our role, we're just advisors in the background. I think it's really important for the superintendent or the COO to be the face of the program. So that's who you really want to be out in front of the community in these meetings. But the behind the scenes understanding, planning, scheduling, working through the different topics of conversation that needs to happen in those meetings. And then also, in those meetings, it's really important to bring in your CFO or your financial advisor and talk about the difference in school funding and how you have M&O and INS, and really just educate your community on how the schools are funded and how the operations work, so they have a better understanding of the need for the bonds.
Absolutely.
As an education guy, this is where the helping with the advocacy piece of schools, right? Because the majority of the community has no idea how schools are funded. And until you understand how schools are funded, you can't truly and appropriately look at, a bond election correctly, right? Because it may not be what you want, but understanding that it's something that you need and that what's what student needs, because as we know, everything we do, we should be looking at through student outcome focused decision making, right? What makes the best sense for the community and the students, and until you understand what that looks like and what funding looks like, it's hard to do what you need to do, so to speak, in regards to voting for the right types of projects. But advocacy is huge.
I've heard it often said that you can't sell somebody a cure for something until they've first been convinced of the disease. I also believe that if you give the community and all the other stakeholders the same information as you have, they're probably going to come up with similar conclusions that you do. One of the first things I think that we have to do is probably go to the board, as you mentioned earlier, Jason, and you have some board experience, and that has to be a superintendent board discussion. Tell me what that looks like to you as far as just getting through that team of 8 process before we ever go out for and try to even call a bond election. What does that discussion look like within that team of 8? What kind of information do you want as a board member?
Well, traditionally, the superintendent proposes the idea, and idealistically, you would have data that would support the reason in which you need these projects and why the community needs the projects, right? And so I feel like if given all the right information and the right context, then I feel like it's a pretty easy decision to make, given that you have a good functioning board, right? So if you have good board stability, a good functioning board, I think that it's pretty easy. It's important. In my experience, we always were purposeful about, hey, if you don't like something, please, let's talk about it. What is it about this that you would make you want to support it, right?
Before we leave this part of the discussion, what is it that you see as being some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen districts make in this bond planning and implementing process?
Not getting community support, not truly allowing the community to give input, and also not reaching out to your business communities, because all businesses depend on good schools and a happy community, right? Everyone benefits from that. The students and the general population, the business owners specifically. So getting those business owners involved on what your needs and wants are as a community and bringing them into the decision-making process and listening to what they have to say.
The two things that came to my mind, the first one is the people that don't engage with the naysayers and just lead them out there to run, that's going to be a bad thing. So the ones that we want as part of that community advisory committee, we want the people who are negative. We want them against it because we want them to see the real truth of what's out there. And it may not turn them from a no to a yes, but it'll turn them from a vocal no to maybe a silent no. And so I think that's really important. And the other thing is just education, with the law and having to say this is a tax rate increase. It's getting out there and educating those people whose property taxes are frozen on how it really impacts them truly so that they're not a negative. And then a third one that came to my mind is just really being open with your staff, because a lot of these districts, the staff lives in the district. If they're not educated or they're not encouraged to go vote, whether they vote yes or no, but give them the opportunity to vote, because those are the people that are in your community, have a very vested interest and can really sway the numbers.
Something that I feel like that's really helpful, if I must say, is that if you can tie your needs and your wants to student achievement, you can continue showing the community that at the end of the day, this is going to help kids. I feel like that is most important. I feel that that's a very important part of the story.
I think that's such a critical part because after all, when you boil it down, why are schools here? Why do they exist? And that's for student achievement. And it's not that difficult to tie well-functioning facilities in with student achievement. That's great. And I think, Derek, you make a great point also about bringing in the naysayers. You're going to hear from the naysayers sooner or later. You may as well bring them in sooner and go ahead and hear the grievances. As you said, sometimes I've discovered that someone who's perceived as a naysayer is all along someone who just felt like they weren't being heard. When you give them a good listen and a good ear, and by the way, they may be right. They may be right, or at least partially so. Having said that, if they're right, they're my best friend because they got to help direct us. So great points, gentlemen. Let me ask you this. I'm a superintendent. Why do I need to pay another fee for something that maybe some people feel, if I'm a small district especially, that my contractor or somebody else, maybe even within the district, could do? Why would I need to have somebody like you guys come in and do the job for me?
Guess I'll start on this one. There's very capable people within central office, and their job is about education. So you may have a facilities manager, you may have, an operations officer. He already has a full-time job. Planning, construction, procurement, everything that goes into it, can become a full-time job, especially when you're looking at it. But the other side of that is just the ability for us to staff up and down as necessary. Like I was in a meeting this morning where we were discussing an upcoming bond, and we're going to be looking at 17 to 20 projects in the summer of 2027. As a school district, you can't staff up, and add 4 to 5 people through a summer just to manage construction projects. As a third-party agency, we can, and we've got that ability to increase when necessary and decrease when necessary without having to hire full-time staff to support the projects.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, can you tell us about a time, without naming names, when you actually were able to come in and you saved the school district time and or money on a particular project? Just kind of tell us what happened there.
Derek's got many great stories.
I do. I should have prepped better for this one. The one I come back to in my head is one of the first bonds that I was a part of. When we jumped off, we were looking for, you were talking about those quick wins. How do you, as a construction manager, program manager, help facilitate a quick win when you've got a May election? That time window from May into June 1st, when summer projects start, is very minimal. So you have to do a lot of front end work in order to get that done. We ended up doing a turf replacement, but we were able to have our contractor ready on board, got it executed, done, and within that first 2 months. So we gave the district a very quick and early win so that the community saw, hey, we approved this and things are moving. A big thing of what we do is verifying scope and reviewing, that what the district asked for is what they're getting. I had a project where the ag barn had automatic water feeders that were supposed to be fed from the roof, and we had conflicts with overhead fans in the ag barn. Finding that problem early before it became a change order, we were able to save a lot of time because we were able to reroute everything down low through the slab before they poured it. be beneficial to everyone while still achieving the desired intent.
And Derek, one of the things that we talked about last time when Marty and Kendra were on that I think bears repeating because maybe a different audience that listening to this podcast, one of the things that I thought was most important that you guys offer is the ability to go through those invoices and make sure that nobody accidentally puts anything extra on an invoice when they charge the school district. Sometimes the wrong thing shows up or the wrong price shows up or the wrong amount shows up. While the school district does have the finance department to go through those, they're not as in tune with the project maybe, and they may not catch some of those things. You guys have the ability to go through invoicing and making sure that the school district's being charged for what they're supposed to be charged for, I guess.
Yeah. And when you're looking at like a construction manager at risk project where you're reconciling 20 to 30 subcontractors against a general contractor's pay application, it's a very time consuming, very paper intensive process, but it's something that verifies that the district is getting what they're paying for. And if you're looking for your accounts payable department to look at all that and say, yes, this makes sense, they're not going to have the knowledge of that. Plus, they're not going to be out there on site to actually verify that that information and that work's been done. So it's kind of a two-part. It's verification that the work in place matches what the subcontractor is billing, and then reconciling across from the construction manager at risk pay app through the subcontractors. Another big thing of what we do as far as cost control is that upfront contract negotiation. When you're talking about architects, negotiating their fees, being very specific on what is a basic service and what is an additional service so that we're not surprised if something needs to be added later that it wasn't covered. Same thing with like a construction manager's contingency, knowing what those percentages are in the contract, what's allowed, basing when we do our guaranteed maximum price. If we do it at 100% construction documents or at 50% is a big change on how much contingency they're going to be allowed in that guaranteed maximum price. There's a lot of little nuances that come in there that we can have a very positive impact for the district just from having that knowledge and experience on doing many other projects.
You know, you guys use a term, owner's rep. This means a lot to me as a former superintendent because I wanted somebody that worked for me. I've got the architect. Yes, he's working for me, but a lot of times we have this with contractors who have this kind of relationship with subcontractors, and they're all getting paid by the school district. I want somebody who's going to go to bat for me.
As a board member, that was a really powerful tool, very powerful tool, because as you stated, everyone else is working to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Hopefully, right? They're working for themselves. The owner's rep's the only person that's working for the school district itself. So once again, we go back to that community trust piece, right? Like, how can I provide transparency to the community to ensure that I am doing what I'm saying I'm doing, and someone is there at those 3 a.m. pours in the morning when, the school district can't be. The lens in which I look at it is like, how does this help build community trust and accountability, right? Because accountability, we expect our kids and our teachers and our parents and everyone to be accountable, but how can we show that we're being accountable?
For me, the owner's rep it really is just someone that is there on the owner's sole behalf. While my team may work for AGCM, they're all 100% invested in the districts they work for. What's really cool about that is as they start to work with the superintendent, with the operations, with purchasing, they're creating these relationships with the staff to where they're now fully integrated and they're no longer really AGCM. They're a part of the districts they work for, and they 100% buy in to the communities that they're working in. And I think that's really important because then they start looking at the dollars as they come in and they're like, well, if we can save here, what can we do to benefit the district? What can we do to benefit the schools? How can we help get back to the teachers? It's that kind of community involvement that really comes from being just a true owner's rep. Our owners are really the only ones that we're worried about and looking to take care of. It's really important to me. And the biggest compliment I get is when I talk to some of our owners and they're like, we love this person. She's one of us. She's part of our district. Everyone that walks around from the custodians to the maintenance guys all call by name. And it's really just created a family group within the district. And it's because we believe in what we're doing and are really valued as part of being the owner's rep, representing them in all that we do.
Derek, that's a great summary. And that always gave me great comfort when I could go to that person and I knew that they were going to have my back, but also knew that if I were headed down the wrong direction, because I'm not a construction guy, that they would be able to say, I don't think that's what you want to do. I could take their opinion to the bank. That's when they were such a value add to the district and could give me advice that I didn't have in other places.
I was going to say, it's really important to build that trust. And, it's a two-way street. We can speak to the district on what we see and what we think, but also being able to listen and take criticism or take the direction of the district and run with that. If we've got to pivot on the project or pivot with sequencing on how things go, be able to listen and relay that information back to the contractors and architects.
Yes, sir. Gentlemen, if we could pivot to the complexity that we've had recently. Senate Bill 843, most recently in the 89th legislature, mandates more transparency, and TEA is required now to build a centralized, searchable online database that also covers proposed and approved school bonds, ballot language, and so forth. Is this something that's come up on y'all's radar yet as something that is causing changes in the bond landscape?
So I know there's been many discussions about what this looks like for anyone involved in the school construction industry and business. And I do know that there is planning going on. How do we line ourselves up to be a resource for school districts? Ultimately, we want to set them up for success so that, once again, that community trust is being built. This seems to be like it could be a little complex. I can't speak personally about all the details of it, but there are conversations being had, and there will be some future planning that will be involved in dissecting this.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of doing something that we all want to do anyway, and that's have more transparency. It just sort of outlines what that's going to look like.
As a former board member, something that's always been of interest to me and my fellow board members through my experiences is some type of transparency dashboard, something that you can use to help communicate with the district, once again, so you can continue that relationship with them and keep them up to date on what's going on and all the projects that's the district's that's taken on.
Yeah. Communication is so key in all of this process. The last thing you want cast toward the school district or anybody in such a project is the idea that there's lack of transparency. Tell me about what type of communication we need to have with our communities regarding upcoming bonds. What does that look like?
Every district operates differently, right? Depends on if you have long-range planning or not. I think calendaring is huge, especially when you're dealing with school districts, right? Like parents, community members, the board, staff, everyone depends on their calendar. And calendaring out events. Before I was even on the board, I was part of a district-wide planning committee. This started almost 2 years previous to us even going out for a bond. And it started to allow the community a voice to brainstorm about what the future may look like, and continuing that process and showing the community that you are listening to them is key, because no one wants to do work and then find out that no one was really listening to them in the first place. But as you continue that process along, and whether it be email or letters out to parents, whatever it may look like in your district, but just ensuring that you can communicate what's currently going on and then how that correlates to, once again, the student outcomes, and to ensure that we're still staying focused on education.
You really touched on it as far as just communication. And one of the areas where social media is kind of a benefit, because you can very quickly and easily send out updates. And I think it's important that people have an understanding of what's going on throughout the design process, because we've talked a couple of times about, oh, we passed a bond in May. Where's the work? When are the shovels going in the ground? It's 3 months minimum, if not 9. And so when you're talking a large project, you may pass a bond in May of 2026, and you may not actually break ground until mid 2027. It's having that communication with the community on what's going on in the background, sharing plans, sharing information, letting them be a part of feedback when you're looking at some of the design stuff. Utilizing the different outlets we have, whether it be the board meetings, if you send out board notes, social media, Parent Square. I've seen all sorts of things go out in different platforms just to make sure the community has the opportunity to run into the information, because the more places you can put it and give them the opportunity to find it, the better off you're going to be.
Absolutely. How do you mitigate things like scope creep in a project? These things just have a tendency to grow sometimes, don't they? Derek, how do you do that?
So a big part of that is just setting a district standard up front. You understand kind of what your district standards are to where you're not going to mitigate from that very much is really important. It's also really critical to have that end user input. It's got to be kind of valued out. If you've got a band director here for 2 years and 4 years, they may not be. And so specific things to that one person may not be beneficial for the overall project and could have added scope creep to it. But it's really important to have your budget, kind of understand where that budget is, look around those numbers moving forward, and just make sure that what you're doing is focused around the kids and how the functionality of the campus and the facility work for the kids, and not necessarily some of the specifics that you may have from staff or teachers and how they want to see that facilitated.
We've just been talking about communication, and oftentimes we'll discuss costs up front, of course, and we're projecting and we're using current costs. But we have a rapidly changing political things right now across the globe that can directly affect a lot of those costs. How will we, in a construction project, be able to not only mitigate those, but also communicate that those costs can fluctuate sometimes in a volatile manner?
Yeah, it's really crazy when you think about what happened back in 2020, 2021, and just how everything escalated off the charts, and no one really foresaw that coming. And so you've got a lot of people that are trying to prevent that or mitigate their risk and how they're pricing out projects. For a long time, we saw escalation contingencies and guaranteed maximum price contracts to where contractors had price built in for that. That's kind of gone away right now with some of the volatilities that are going on around the world. New contracts that come up, there may be some of that.
From the board side, that's, a lot of our conversation was around, bond contingencies and what that looks like and how we can use that as a tool. But also, this is where that long range, long-term planning came in, right? Our expectation as a board is like, look, if we know that we're going to be building X, Y, and Z, then we need the metal on the ground immediately, right? To ensure that maybe we didn't, a year down the road when we were actually using it, the price didn't go up 30, 40%, because that could be a reality, right? Once again, that comes to the communication piece, and keeping the community up to date on what it is that you may be facing. I don't know that you can get around that challenge. I think that's just part of the advocating and educating your community on public education funding, and long-range planning helps.
You just triggered my mind. We talked about, we start bond planning a year before the bond. So if you're planning a year before, you pass the bond, you're designing for a year, you're not actually building for 2.5 years possibly from when you've set that original budget. So it's really important when you set that budget, you don't set it in today's dollars. You set it in dollars that are escalated out for 2 or 3 years, knowing, and just that's a reality that we have these days, that we're going to see prices go up. And so we have to plan for that and mitigate the risk for the district.
Excellent. Gentlemen, we have a national, and actually in some, this is happening many places around the world, we have a situation of depopulation based on just simply a forward birth rate. You have to maintain a 2.1 birth rate in order just to have just to be flat. And we're now below 2. I think it's 1.8. Isn't that right, James? Or somewhere in there. And so therefore, we have a lot of communities and a lot of school districts that are losing enrollment. They have, for the first time in my professional life anyway, we have fewer students per grade level in elementary school than we have in high school. It's an interesting phenomenon. My question is, have you seen that much in what you do? And if so, how is that impacting decisions?
I will tell you that there are companies starting to have conversations, about what that may look like for the future, because here we are asking the community for bond money, and yet we're closing schools. And that's a strange dynamic, right? That's something that we really haven't seen before in the last 100, 200 years that public education has been around. It's real. It'll be really interesting to see how school districts and public education as a whole will navigate through that. And I think that's part of what AGCM brings to the table is we can help with the help of the planning and the long range vision of what that may look like for you. Because if you don't have help as a school district, once again, you know this, Mr. Hopper, like you're educating children, you need help to navigate an issue, like a real issue that is not a school issue, but a societal, worldly issue, actually.
I think as a superintendent, I think one of the things that would a great service that you guys could provide me is just basically going and maybe working with my municipality. And because if I'm losing enrollment, we're losing citizens and so forth. So maybe we could consolidate facilities, and it could be a win-win for the taxpayer, and that could be a whole new industry to be able to come in and boy, that'd be a great service, I would think.
Yeah. One of the things we're seeing now is we're seeing these bonds that are coming out that aren't necessarily for new construction. It's for maintenance and upgrading or aging facilities because there's not the growing population that's requiring new builds, but the students are still in those classrooms. The roofs still need to keep the water out. The HVAC still needs to stay cold. That's one of the really important things in a service that we provide, and like doing a full facility condition assessment to where you have a list and a scope of aging infrastructure and things that you need to maintain and upgrade. And a lot of times our M&O budgets these days cannot pay for all the upgrades that are required on a building that may be 20 years old. There's a lot of importance in that long range planning and what schools may need to be consolidated, updating and upgrading the right ones, and really having a long-term look at that, because you are seeing not just the lower birth rates, but people aren't leaving. Their kids are graduating, but the parents are staying in the houses. And so you're not seeing new enrollment come in through that.
Absolutely. I think that what we have to do is make our facilities give them more longevity. And so we may be seeing a lot more bonds that do that as we consolidate buildings and such. We've covered a lot, and there's a whole lot more yet to cover. Are there any other final thoughts that you might have that you would want to leave with our listeners?
I mean, for me, we've said it, but it comes back to the students, it comes back to the teachers, and, really how do we educate them and how do we provide them with safe, clean, and functional facilities? And whether that's through a bond, whether that's through maintenance, but it's just having a good understanding of what the needs are, what the requirements are, and taking care of the kids in the community that are out there. And that's really one of the fun parts. We actually just finished a baseball softball stadium that was part of a 24 bond, and was able to go to opening day there and just see the community come together, and just the excitement and the smiles on the kids' faces, and being in new facilities and being in a place where they're able to grow and they're able to just really enjoy, but they're also safe. It's a cool feeling to see, and it's exciting when you see something come from a conceptual design, and this was in our head, and we went through all the challenges to pass the bond, and now we see it in place and in use. It's really an awesome thing.
That's beautiful. I think you put it very, very well. From my perspective, I've seen it. When you build a facility or even rebuild a facility, whether through remodel or whatever it is, the students seem to walk with their heads a little higher. They seem to function better. So do the teachers. It gives a boost to the campus. It gives a boost to the whole community, and it gives them something to be proud of. I appreciate that. Anything else, Jason? Any thoughts?
Once again, I think Derek said it exactly right. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough business, and there's so much involved. AGCM, what they do is there to make educators look good, right? They're to help support what your main mission and vision is, which is educating students. Through my personal experience as a parent and a board member and a community member, setting up the community and the students for success is most important. And any way that we can help facilitate that is one of the best things in the world. Just like Derek said, walking into a new school and seeing an invigorated community and happy students and happy teachers, there's just nothing like it.
Excellent. Excellent. Where can folks find out a little bit more about AGCM?
Probably go to the website, www.agcm.com.
There you go.
Follow them on social media.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Mr. Grimm?
James, thanks for your thoughts on this important topic. And you and one of our team members, Kelly Kinsler, are working on a program designed to facilitate better coordination between schools and municipalities. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sure. We've got an initiative called Shared Solutions, and it's just that. Texas communities increasingly face more complex challenges that require school districts and municipalities to really work together more effectively. You know, we mentioned just a minute ago about the declining population issue. Well, that's going to hit everybody. Issues also like school safety, the coordination that can come from getting municipalities and school districts together on things like land use, facility use, transportation, emergency response, planning for growth or lack of growth. So what we've done is we've looked at this and said that's an issue. Those are shared problems between municipalities and schools. Shared Solutions looks at taking school boards and municipalities and having joint meetings. And also we've talked a lot about planning in this podcast, and have some joint planning sessions where we can talk about things like how can we maximize the use of technology in our community by combining our school district and our municipality and all the other issues that I just mentioned. So in doing so, the idea is that we maximize taxpayers' funds and also that we can synthesize the vision for the whole community.
So we can potentially spend less money and get more out of the tax dollars that we do spend.
Yes, sir.
It's always a good plan. Thank you. Derek and Jason, we appreciate you being with us today. Definitely follow AGCM on LinkedIn to go along with their website, agcm.com. To the listeners, we appreciate everything that you do in your communities. Please check out clearcareerpro.com for the latest job opportunities. Like and subscribe to The Clear Voice, and we will catch you next time.